hopefully start streaming online. So hopefully we are streaming both YouTube and on the Instagram. So if are you a wedding professional? Hello, Cocktail America. Hello, Charles. If you are a wedding professional and you don't like your shelter in place, your laws preventing people from getting together, then what you should do is sue the governor for declaratory relief, saying that those laws are unconstitutional, and get back to work. Does it sound far-fetched? Maybe a little bit, but an actual wedding venue, hello from Uruguay, an actual wedding venue in Virginia has done just that. A wedding venue in the Commonwealth of Virginia has sued the governor so that they can have weddings take place despite the shelter in place that's going on right now. So let's kind of hop into it. So in Virginia, as we know, just like all around the country, the governor there has issued a series of what's called executive orders, basically in the name of public health, limiting what people can do. Okay, we know all about this as wedding professionals. Let me go through the litany that's in the lawsuit here. So on March 12th, Governor Northam issued what's called basically Executive Order 51. And that was kind of like, hey, listen, we have a public health emergency. Okay, so we are going to allocate funds to the different state agencies to fight the pandemic. Okay, fine, fair enough. But a week later, March 17th of 2020, you get Executive Order 52, which is the actual beginnings of the shelter in place and the laws against public gatherings. And in the state of Virginia, Executive Order 52 on March 17th prohibited more than 10 people essentially in restaurants, public places. Fast forward another week, you get Executive Order 53, and this was essentially the death knell for this particular plaintiff in this lawsuit. And that prohibited gatherings of 10 or more people. It closed all restaurants, not just like you can have a certain amount of people in restaurants, but it closed all the restaurants and essentially closed sporting events, concerts, anywhere there's public gatherings. You're done now, okay? A little bit later on, that got refined to you can open up if you have a wedding venue, if you have a winery, but it has to be 50% occupancy. In other words, if you could hold 100 people at your event, now you can only have 50 people, but still capping at 50 persons. So there is a venue owner in Virginia, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I say Commonwealth because it's not a state, it's a Commonwealth, named John Tiggs. And John Tiggs has a 24-acre winery that also holds weddings. And according to the lawsuit, he had over $1 million in revenue in 2019, and in 2020 he's going to have almost close to zero. He had 16 packages booked for 2020, and now as a direct result of the executive orders, he has none. Oh, it's Charlie. Hey, Charlie. So essentially this lawsuit is saying to the governor, your executive orders have killed my business. Your executive orders saying that I can only be at half capacity, and still even then I can only have 50 people or less, I'm not going to have a business anymore. So this individual has sued the governor. This is not a normal lawsuit. In other words, this is not like a breach of contract case or a tort case or something like that. This is a case based on the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, saying you are not allowed as governor to issue laws from the governor's office. It's unconstitutional, particularly with the type of stuff that you're doing. That's the basis of the lawsuit. Essentially, number one, Mr. Tiggs, the owner of this winery, is saying, number one, the statistics are not proportionate with the actions that you've taken. And this is where I'm kind of like, I don't know if I agree with this, but he lists that as of June 5th in Virginia, and he being the Mr. Tiggs in the lawsuit, says that as of June 5th, 48,000 people tested positive for COVID-19, 5,000 people were hospitalized for COVID-19, and 1,400 people had died because of COVID-19, which means 99.9% of Virginians are not suffering from COVID-19. So in other words, he's arguing to the governor that this public health emergency is not affecting 99.9% of people, and therefore it's unconstitutional, at least in part for that reason alone. And I don't know if I agree with that. I feel like, the whole point of this is to help stop spreading the disease. So that's number one. Number two, the plaintiff in this case, Mr. Tiggs, is saying that there's not enough science to support the executive orders shutting these places down. In other words, where does any of the science say that having more than 50 people in a place makes it any more or less likely that infectious diseases are going to be spread? And then another angle that he kind of takes is that, this is only affecting people that are 80 years and older, at least in Virginia. So that's another argument he's making. I don't know if I quite agree with that either. I feel like the science bears out that, this is affecting a lot of different people. So I don't agree with the take that the executive orders are unconstitutional because they're not backed by science, or that they're not statistically proportionate to what's actually going on. So, but he also goes on to say that the executive orders are unconstitutional because they have not been ratified or agreed to or issued, or I don't know. The word is escaping me. They haven't been ratified by the Virginia Assembly. In other words, he's not a king; he's a governor, and any laws that pass need to be passed by the actual assembly of the state, the legislature. And because that hasn't happened, and because of the fact that this is such a huge burden on the economy, that it's unconstitutional, both under the Virginia Constitution and the United States Constitution, that this is a proclamation just from the governor. So that's his main argument. So then he goes on a couple more arguments that are just based on the constitutional issues. Number one is that there's not an end date to the phased shelter-in-place rules, and that, again, no state assembly has agreed to it. One of the things that I take issue in the way that the lawsuit has been written is that he also argues that the law is arbitrary and capricious, meaning that it's not systematic and applies to everyone equally. And the reasoning that he gives, which kind of pisses me off, is that no one arrested any of the Black Lives Matter protesters. That how come people are allowed to go and protest in the street, but I can't have my 16 wedding packages over the course of 2020. So the executive order, at least in that part, is unconstitutional because it's not being enforced equally among people. Oh, hello. Let's see, Teresa. So at any rate, that's the litany of reasons why this individual wedding venue owner wants to have the law declared unconstitutional and not applied anymore. Now, I'm not some type of civil libertarian. I think that as long as there's a rational basis for shutting these businesses down for the purposes of promoting public health, reasonable people can differ on that. But I feel for him a little bit in terms of it can't be never ending. And, it certainly doesn't need to be based on science. In this instance, I do think it's based on science, but I kind of feel for him. I think that for most states, there needs to be some type of collaborative take on it in terms of if the governor issues a proclamation, we just consider that kind of like an emergency thing, and then the actual legislature, the assembly, or whatever you have in your state, should act on that and actually pass something. So that way, there's a legitimacy behind it. So that's the main takeaway I have from this is, even if the legislature agrees with the governor and passes laws that mimic what these proclamations are, he's still going to be in the same place. So the takeaway is that there's no, like, would this be worth it for you, if you, in your state, whatever state you're in, to file a lawsuit against the governor, try to get these laws adjudicated as unconstitutional? No, because all it would mean is that the legislature is going to say, okay, it's fine, and then your arguments are moot at that point. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen in this case, is that by the time this gets through the first initial stages of the lawsuit, it's going to be rendered moot because the legislature is either going to uphold it or get rid of it. And that's it. I'm not quite sure the circumstances behind Mr. Tiggs' relationship with the attorney, but the attorney bringing this case on his behalf is also, I believe, a state senator. Or he might actually be a senator. I don't know, but should have looked that up before I did this. But this is not something that I think is ordinarily going to take place. I think this is not necessarily a political move, but it is closer to being a political move than it is an actual move to get the help that the lawsuit is actually seeking. So kind of an interesting thing. I'm going to keep an eye out for this. I don't think it's going to go anywhere because I think the state legislature is going to step in. But if there actually is an answer and there's a motion to dismiss, I'll come back on here and we can talk about it. Because if it does go forward, if there is a decision by the judge on this, it might have effects on other states and other people, and definitely in the future for future pandemics. So just an interesting thing. If you're watching this on YouTube right now, as opposed to Instagram, if you're watching it on YouTube, I'm going to link the lawsuit down below, an article about it, and you can read about it there. But we'll keep following this. But interesting times that we live in, where you're suing the governor so that you can have your weddings take place at your winery. Anyway, I think that's going to do it for me right now. That's been my hot take on this particular case.